The smirk disappeared in an instant. 1 second, 24-year-old Derek Matthews was leaning casually against the defendant's table, arms crossed, acting like this was all a joke. The next second, his face went pale. Judge Caprio had just said 7 words that changed everything. "Mr. Matthews, I've reviewed your entire history." Derek's hands started to shake. The courtroom went dead silent. And what happened in the next 60 seconds would leave everyone watching absolutely stunned. But to understand why this moment hit so hard, you need to know who Derek Matthews really was. And trust me, it's worse than you think. This wasn't Derek's first time in court. It wasn't even his second. This was his 3rd DUI arrest in 5 years. 3rd. But here's what made this case different. Here's what made Judge Caprio's blood boil the moment he opened that file. Derek didn't think he had a problem. He walked into that Providence courtroom on a Tuesday morning wearing sunglasses indoors, designer sneakers, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than most people's rent. His lawyer, a high-priced attorney his wealthy parents hired, carried a briefcase that screamed, "We're getting this dismissed." Derek thought this was just another inconvenience, another ticket to pay, another slap on the wrist. He had no idea he was about to face Judge Frank Caprio. Let's rewind to 3 weeks earlier. March 15th, 2:47 a.m. Derek was behind the wheel of his BMW, flying down Benefit Street in Providence's east side at nearly 70 miles per hour, in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. His blood alcohol level? 0.18, more than twice the legal limit. He'd just left a club downtown where he'd downed 7 whiskey shots and 3 beers. His friends had tried to stop him. They'd offered to call him an Uber. Derek laughed them off. "I'm fine," he'd said, jingling his keys. "I've driven way more drunk than this." Those words, that attitude, it was about to cost him everything. Officer Maria Santos had been patrolling Benefit Street when she saw the BMW weaving between lanes. She hit her lights. Derek didn't pull over. Instead, he sped up, running 2 red lights before finally skidding to a stop in front of a residential building. When Officer Santos approached the window, Derek was laughing, actually laughing. "Officer, is there a problem?" he'd said, his words slurred, his eyes bloodshot. The smell of alcohol poured out of the car like a wave. "Sir, have you been drinking tonight?" Derek grinned. "Maybe a couple, but I'm totally fine. I'm a great driver." Officer Santos asked him to step out of the vehicle. That's when she saw it. The front right side of Derek's BMW was crumpled. Fresh damage, paint scraped off. The headlight shattered. "Sir, did you hit something tonight?" Derek shrugged. "I don't know, maybe a trash can or something?" It wasn't a trash can. Officer Santos ran the plates and made some calls. 20 minutes earlier, someone had called 911 about a hit and run. A parked car had been completely destroyed on Wickenden Street, just 4 blocks away. But that's not what made Officer Santos's stomach drop. There was something else, something worse. A bicycle, mangled, lying in the street next to the destroyed car, and blood on the pavement. 67-year-old Margaret Chen had been riding her bike home from her night shift at Rhode Island Hospital. She was a nurse, a grandmother, a woman who'd immigrated to America 40 years ago and built a life through hard work and dedication. She took the same route every night, down Wickenden Street, past the shops and cafes, toward her small apartment in Fox Point. That night, Derek Matthews' BMW came out of nowhere. He clipped her bike at nearly 60 miles per hour, sending her flying into a parked car. Then he kept driving. Didn't stop. Didn't slow down. Didn't even look back. A witness who saw the whole thing called 911 immediately. Margaret was rushed to the same hospital where she'd just finished working. Broken collarbone, shattered pelvis, severe concussion, internal bleeding. The doctor said if the ambulance had arrived 2 minutes later, she would have died right there on that street. Derek Matthews had no idea he'd hit anyone. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. When Officer Santos told him about Margaret, about the hit and run, about the charges he was facing, Derek's response was chilling. "That's not my fault. She shouldn't have been riding a bike at night." No remorse, no shock, no humanity, just excuses. Officer Santos arrested him on the spot. DUI, reckless driving, hit and run causing serious bodily injury, leaving the scene of an accident. Derek made his one phone call. Not to apologize, not to ask about the woman he'd nearly killed, to call his parents' lawyer. Fast forward 3 weeks. Derek walked into Judge Caprio's courtroom like he was walking into a spa appointment, relaxed, confident, smirking. His lawyer had already worked out a deal with the prosecutor, reduced charges, minimal penalties, community service, maybe a suspended license for 6 months. Derek figured he'd be out of there in 20 minutes, back to his life, back to his bars and clubs and fast cars. He'd gotten away with it before. Twice. Why would this time be any different? But Judge Frank Caprio wasn't like the other judges Derek had faced. Judge Caprio sat at the bench, reading through Derek's file. His expression was stone. Unreadable. The courtroom was packed. This was a high-profile case. The local news was there. Margaret Chen's family sat in the gallery, watching. Derek's lawyer stood up, smooth and polished, ready to deliver his rehearsed speech about youthful mistakes and lessons learned. But Judge Caprio held up his hand. "Before we hear from counsel," the judge said slowly, "I want to hear from Mr. Matthews himself." Derek's lawyer tensed. This wasn't part of the plan. "Mr. Matthews, please approach the bench." Derek strolled up, hands in his pockets, still smirking. That smirk was about to disappear. "Mr. Matthews," Judge Caprio began, his voice calm but cold as ice. "Do you know why you're here today?" Derek shrugged. "DUI, I guess." "You guess?" "Yeah. I mean, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have driven. But everyone does it, you know? It's not that big a deal." The courtroom gasped. Literally gasped. Judge Caprio's jaw tightened. "Not that big a deal," he repeated slowly. "Is that what you said?" Derek realized his mistake too late. "I mean, I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it, Mr. Matthews?" Silence. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Let me tell you what I see when I look at this file. I see a young man who's been arrested for DUI 3 times. 3 times before the age of 25. I see a young man who has shown 0 remorse, 0 accountability, and 0 regard for human life." Derek's smirk faded. "But what disturbs me most," Judge Caprio continued, "is what happened 3 weeks ago on Wickenden Street." Judge Caprio picked up a photograph from his desk. He held it up for Derek to see. It was Margaret Chen's bicycle, twisted metal, blood on the frame. "Do you know whose bike this is, Mr. Matthews?" Derek swallowed hard. "No. This belongs to Margaret Chen, a 67-year-old nurse, a grandmother, a woman who spent 40 years caring for others, and you nearly killed her." Derek's face went white. "She was riding home from work when you struck her with your car at 60 miles per hour. You sent her flying 15 feet through the air. You shattered her pelvis. You broke her collarbone. You caused internal bleeding that required emergency surgery." The courtroom was dead silent. "And do you know what you did after you hit her?" Derek couldn't speak. "You kept driving. You didn't stop. You didn't call 911. You didn't check if she was alive. You just kept driving." Judge Caprio's voice was shaking now, not with fear, with rage. "And when the police finally caught you, when they told you what you'd done, do you know what you said?" Derek's hands were trembling. "You said, 'That's not my fault. She shouldn't have been riding a bike at night.'" The gallery erupted. Margaret Chen's daughter stood up, tears streaming down her face, screaming at Derek. "You almost killed my mother! You left her to die in the street!" The bailiff had to calm the courtroom. Derek stood frozen, his face pale, his confidence completely shattered. Judge Caprio let the weight of the moment sink in. Then he spoke again, quieter this time, more deliberate. "Mr. Matthews, I want you to turn around." Derek turned. "See that woman in the wheelchair?" There, in the back of the courtroom, was Margaret Chen, frail, bruised, her arm in a sling, her leg in a cast, but alive. "That's the woman you nearly killed," Judge Caprio said. "I want you to look at her. Really look at her." Derek's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, reality was hitting him. "She survived, Mr. Matthews, but she'll never be the same. She can't work anymore. She can't ride her bike anymore. She lives with chronic pain every single day because of your choices." Judge Caprio opened Derek's file again. "Your lawyer has worked out a deal, reduced charges, minimal penalties, and you know what? That deal disgusts me." Derek's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, with all due respect—" "Sit down, counselor." The lawyer sat. "Mr. Matthews, I've been a judge for over 38 years. I've seen thousands of cases. I've shown mercy to people who've made genuine mistakes, people who showed remorse, people who wanted to change." He paused. "But you? You're not sorry. You're only sorry you got caught." Derek tried to speak. "Your Honor, I'm not finished." Judge Caprio stood up from his bench. The entire courtroom held its breath. "I'm rejecting the plea deal." Derek's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, you can't—" "I just did. Mr. Matthews, you are hereby sentenced to the maximum penalty allowed under Rhode Island law." Derek's knees buckled. 5 years in state prison. No parole for the first 2 years. "What?" Derek shouted. "Your license is permanently revoked. You will never drive in the state of Rhode Island again." Derek's mother started crying in the gallery. "You will also pay full restitution to Margaret Chen for all medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. That amount will be determined by the court, but I assure you, it will be substantial." Derek collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. But Judge Caprio wasn't done. "And here's what you're going to do during those 5 years in prison, Mr. Matthews. You're going to think about Margaret Chen every single day. You're going to think about the life you almost took. The grandmother who almost never got to see her grandchildren again. The nurse who dedicated her life to saving others while you were out destroying lives." His voice softened, but the words cut deeper. "Maybe, just maybe, you'll learn what it means to be a decent human being." The courtroom erupted in applause. Margaret Chen, from her wheelchair, nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. Derek sat motionless, shaking, the reality of his actions finally crashing down on him. As the bailiffs led Derek away in handcuffs, he looked back one last time. Not at his parents, not at his lawyer, at Margaret Chen. And for the first time in his life, Derek Matthews understood what he'd done. He'd almost killed an innocent woman because he thought he was above the law. He'd thought his wealth, his privilege, his charm could get him out of anything. But Judge Frank Caprio had just taught him the most important lesson of his life. Actions have consequences, and some judges won't let you laugh your way out of them. 6 months later, Margaret Chen returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom. Not as a victim, as a guest. She was walking again. Slowly, with a cane, but walking. Judge Caprio invited her to share her story with a group of young people who'd been arrested for DUI. She stood at the podium, her voice steady. "I forgive Derek Matthews," she said, "not because what he did was okay, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me more." The room was silent. But forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences. He made a choice that night, a choice that almost ended my life. And Judge Caprio made sure he understood that choices matter. She looked directly at the young people in the room. If you think driving drunk is no big deal, I want you to imagine your mother, your grandmother, your sister lying in a hospital bed fighting for their life, because that's what you're risking every time you get behind the wheel. Derek Matthews is currently serving his sentence at the adult correctional institutions in Rhode Island. According to reports, he's a model prisoner. He attends AA meetings, he's taking college courses, he writes letters to Margaret Chen, apologizing, asking for forgiveness. She hasn't responded yet, but maybe someday she will. Judge Caprio's sentence didn't just punish Derek. It woke him up. It forced him to confront the monster he'd become. And maybe, just maybe, when he gets out in a few years, he'll be a different person. But here's the lesson we all need to remember. Judge Caprio didn't show Derek mercy because mercy wasn't what he needed. Derek needed accountability. He needed consequences. He needed to understand that his actions almost destroyed a life. Sometimes the most compassionate thing a judge can do is refuse to let someone off easy. Sometimes real justice means making sure people face the full weight of their choices. And that's exactly what Judge Caprio did. This case went viral. Millions of people watched the courtroom footage, and the response was overwhelming. People praised Judge Caprio for his strength, his conviction, his refusal to let wealth and privilege buy a way out of justice. But not everyone agreed. Some said 5 years was too harsh for a first-time violent offense. Some said Derek deserved a second chance. Some said the judge let his emotions cloud his judgment. But here's what those critics don't understand. This wasn't about emotions. This was about patterns. Derek had 2 previous DUIs. He'd been given second chances and third chances. And he'd learned nothing. Margaret Chen almost paid for those failed lessons with her life. So Judge Caprio drew a line in the sand, and he sent a message to every drunk driver in Rhode Island, not in my courtroom. So here's my question for you. Do you think Judge Caprio was right? Or did he go too far? Should Derek have gotten a lighter sentence? Or did he deserve every single day of those 5 years? I want to hear from you in the comments. This is one of those cases where people genuinely disagree, and that's okay. But here's what we can all agree on. Drunk driving kills. It destroys families. It ruins lives. And if you've ever thought about getting behind the wheel after drinking, I want you to think about Margaret Chen. Think about her lying on that street, bleeding, broken, wondering if she was going to die. Think about her family getting that phone call in the middle of the night. Think about the nurse who spent 40 years saving lives, nearly losing hers because someone thought they were invincible. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that actions have consequences, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button for All Rise. We cover cases like this every week. Stories of justice, redemption, accountability, and humanity. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's made that choice to drive drunk. Someone who thinks they're above the law. Because Judge Caprio's message isn't just for Derek Matthews. It's for all of us. Your choices matter. Your actions have consequences. And one bad decision can change lives forever. Thanks for watching. And remember, the next time you're tempted to make a dangerous choice, think about Margaret Chen. Think about Judge Caprio. And choose differently.